Let's get started, everybody. Welcome to the third Sites Now presentation. And if you're new to Sites Now, or your organization has been with Sites Now since the beginning and you're tuning in for the first time, welcome. Thanks for joining us. Just to kind of give you a quick brief of what to expect, we're going to talk a little bit today about decentralized trials. We have a great speaker with Amanda, as I mentioned, and we'll learn a little bit about her work here shortly. But then we'll break into teams, talk about what decentralized means to you. We've got a couple of great breakout topics and a chance to meet with each other and network a little bit. And then we'll come back as a group and share what we discussed, okay? That's kind of how today works. Why do we do it like that? Why do we build this? Well, when we started first feeling the impact of the pandemic on our events, we had a lot of outreach to Marcus and the headquarters team around, hey, we still want to meet. We still want to get together. So on top of our virtual summits, we've built Sites Now as a way to really content source and learn from each other. Our first topic was built around why sites matter in the new 2020, and the article will be coming out next week, just in time for our first forum. Next week is the first Sites Now forum. We're going to have fun with it on the Tuesday before Thanksgiving. We're trying to make it a little more informal than maybe some of our other presentations. But the idea is just to revisit with our panelists about why they've participated and what we've learned with Sites Now. It will be open to everyone. So the folks that you're seeing on your screens here, or that you'll be meeting, these are folks that have supported Sites Now, but next week, that particular forum will be open to the entire world, really, and we hope to have good participation. We've already got a lot of folks registered for next week. Each time we meet, what do we do with it? Well, we're gonna talk as teams, and we're gonna break out into the teams, and we're gonna take it, and it becomes a little bit of a different piece of content for our audiences. The first time we met, we created a video, and our first article will be published here shortly. Our friend and colleague from Medics, Molly, we met with her after our last Sites Now session and talked about potentially working on an article together for what became our budgets and contracts discussion. Each of these is a little different. Even if you're not involved in the topic we're discussing, like last month was budgets and contracts. Some of you might not have tuned in. You might have thought, we're not really involved in that area. It's a great opportunity to learn about how things are impacting not only sites, but the enterprise. And that's what we're trying to do, is trying to share and build this together. So thanks for tuning in today. You might have noticed that some of our findings will make their way into all of the summits for next year. Our next Site Solution Summit is going to be our virtual Global Oncology Site Solution Summit. It will be virtual. We are using our same platform that we just experienced the virtual Site Solution Summit with. And if you didn't have a chance to attend, I'll tell you that we were up 20% in registrations. So while we would have loved to see everyone in person, we did have a tremendous registration, and people are still getting used, I think, to the virtual meetups, but we're trying to keep it consistent because people really like the networking feature, the meeting feature, and just the ease of the platform. So if you're interested, the virtual Global Oncology Site Solution Summit will be happening in February. We'll open for registration. And Allison, if you are on the line, could you guys unmute Allison for a moment? Allison, could you help me share what the registration, will that be the same as the global?
It will be a little bit different. We're finalizing the registration for the Oncology Summit, but it will be the all access registration that will include contact hours, recordings, all sessions will be included, and then you'll have the standard registration that will be complimentary to everyone, but that will only include the plenary sessions for that one, no contact.
Okay. Okay, thank you. I just wanted to let everyone know that that is going to be. We want to increase our oncology footprint And this is a great opportunity to invite some folks that maybe haven't had a chance to experience an SCRS event in person to attend with us at this Oncology Summit. It was the only conference we had this year live, and we had a great meeting. We were up 40% in attendance, and really kind of looking forward to continuing that program. So thanks to all of you who are involved there. Much of what we discussed today will likely find its way into the agenda. What's our 2021 look like? Well, right now we are planning for 3 virtual experiences, obviously oncology, but then we're still discussing how we're going to implement Europe. Will it be the same as our virtual summits or something a little different? And then our Australia meeting will also involve our Asia regions. So we're trying to change things up a little bit as we understand the impact of the pandemic. And then hopefully our plan is to have a live event next October, and we can't all wait to get back to that pool and that sunshine next year. This program and the people on the call have helped keep SCRS in motion. And when we knew we weren't going to have a live event, helping us keep your investment with SCRS and some of you investing completely new into the program has been a difference for us. We've been able to offer those free registrations to sites. We've been able to scholarship a few sites. We've been able to build new content for sites, and it starts with the supporters that are on the line. Thank you to our pharmaceutical supporters, our CRO supporters, and our solution provider supporters. We have an awesome community of business partners top to bottom, and we are very grateful to have you. Thanks for joining us today. Hey, ground rules. Oh, who doesn't love rules? Thanks for always making me have to share the rules. Listen, this is really meant to be open and candid, and that's one of the fun things about the Site Solutions Summit, yeah? But please remember, especially when we're in our breakouts, not a position really to sell or to gripe, but to solve, yeah? And if you'd like, you can take a moment right now in your chat and go ahead and I'll do that. I'll do that myself so you know what I'm talking about. Whoops. You can chat your contact information if you'd like to let people know who you are and who you're with. And just a really quick, I see Lindsay, Lindsay Morales, you're at the top of my screen for whatever reason. Hello. See how Lindsay, she's got her name and her company right there. So it's easy to know where Lindsay's from. And I would encourage you guys, if you don't know how to do that, you simply click on your picture. Okay, there's 3 dots there, and you say rename. And you'll be able to put your name and your company along with it. So if you have a moment, take a second just to go ahead and do that, because it helps us when we're in the breakouts know where everyone's from. So with these ground rules, our request is simple. If you can help one person on the line today, please do it. If there's someone that you meet that you are just sort of being introduced to for the first time, and you want to learn more about their service, their product, their work, the studies they're working on right now, please make a time to reach back out. When we finish with this tomorrow, or probably by Thursday, you will get the minutes, you'll get the slides that we see today, but you'll also get a roster. It doesn't include email information. We try to be GDPR compliant, but it will include everyone that attended today. And our hope is that we get to know each other as we go, okay? Outside of that, enjoy. So our agenda, well, we're talking about our main presentation here. We're going to break up, I mentioned, and then we'll report in the main room. And just a heads up to mark your calendars for the next Sites Now, which will be in December. That topic will be around diversity in clinical trials and its impact on both efficacy and enrollment. We've got a great plan for that show, that event as well. I hope you guys are enjoying our new Sites Now platform. We're trying to make it easier for you to register for these as you go. So we will share a link to register for that in the notes following today's Sites Now. And with that, I'd like to introduce my colleague, Mr. Jimmy Bechtel. You've probably seen Jimmy at a number of summits, webcasts, and everything in between, Jimmy. He's the Director of Innovation and Engagement for SCRS, and he is here to talk a little bit about decentralized trials and its impact on the work SCRS has done this year, and of course, introduce our speaker. Jimmy?
Well, thanks, Sean. Hi, everybody. Good to see you all. A lot of my favorite faces here on this line, so it's great to see everybody. As Sean kind of alluded to, everyone, this, as with many of the topics that the sites now are focusing on, have really been identified as the big ones, right? Super critical. And decentralized trials, as many of you know, to me, is especially critical, and now more than ever, right, given the space that we operate in and the world we're in. When we knew we had to inform our members about this coming change last year, of being capable and knowledgeable about what it means to participate in decentralized trials before March happened, something came up as an important first step, right? And Virtrial and Amanda's team were really instrumental in helping us create that. And it's been tremendously helpful to our sites to get them that baseline understanding of what it means to participate in a decentralized trial. And now we are able to take our digital innovation initiative. It's really helping us take the concept of decentralized trials to the next level. With the 2 work streams that we've broken out into, and one of those being focused specifically on DCTs. Our goal with these groups is to continue to prepare our industry for what it means to utilize new technology in studies, and make sure that our patients and ultimately our patients and our sites continue to prepare for this future and be ready for what it means to participate in DCTs, because even though it's here, it's continuing to evolve and change every day. So if you hadn't heard about one of these work streams or the Digital Innovation Initiative and want to be part of it, reach out to Sean, Marcus, me, Allison, any of us at SCRS, and we'll be happy to chat with you about what it means to participate in the Digital Innovation Initiative. So now I'd like to turn it over to a close friend of mine and colleague, Amanda Rangel. Amanda is the Executive Vice President of Virtual Trial Solutions at our partner Virtrial. And she's going to talk with you all about some key understanding, some key points around decentralized trial. So Amanda, the floor is yours.
Great, welcome everyone. Just want to make sure everybody can hear me and also see the slides on my screen. Great, I got it right the first try. Thanks, Jimmy. So we will go through the initial slides. And one thing I love to do is begin with the objectives in mind. So I'm excited to take about 15 to 20 minutes this morning. Here's a brief overview of the topics I'll be setting up everybody today. And really the intent is to set the stage where we've been, where we are with decentralized clinical trials, but most importantly, set us up for some provocative thoughts around decentralized trials, how they are affecting the key stakeholders in the industry. So we have some very relevant breakout topics. So we'll go over some basic terminology, clinical research then and now, the benefits of decentralized trials, barriers to adoption, regulations, and the breakout topics. So, all right, let's get going. And there's really no better place than to start with what exactly are we calling virtual trials these days? And throughout the last year and the beginning of this year, you know, the FDA has really been advocating for the use of decentralized clinical trials, which they define as those executed through telemedicine and mobile or local healthcare providers using processes and technologies that differ from the traditional clinical trial model. And I'm sure none of this is new to any of you. And I'd like to bring this to a real life example that you may or may not know in your discussions with me, but last year an FDA representative actually suggested that we change our name at Virtrial, as we could potentially be adding to the confusion in the industry. So while, you know, in show of good faith, it's the FDA after all, we did compromise. And so we've maintained the Virtrial name that the industry's come to know, but we did change our tagline, and it was the future of virtual trials. And we now have a tagline, the future of decentralized trials. So really trying to avoid that confusion and go with the FDA in that. So that being said, now we have another event, and with the release of the most recent FDA guidance on the conduct of clinical trials during COVID, I believe we're seeing much more leniency on what these trials are called in an effort to simply make them happen out of necessity. So some of the alternative terms that industry is using today, direct to patient, virtual trials, hybrid trials, remote trials. And I would encourage all of you, this is not an exhaustive list, if you'd like to chat or keep it for the breakout sessions, but feel free to contribute to today's learning by adding any others that you can think of in the chat box or your breakout sessions. So as mentioned in the prior slide in the definition of decentralized clinical trials, these trials use processes and technologies that really differ from the traditional clinical trial model. So what are some examples of these alternate processes and technologies? Well, if we focus on the top row, we've got video visits, remote CNS raters, lab collection facilities, and home health providers, just to name a few. And they're all virtual components that still allow for the human connection that we know is really important to participants in clinical trials. But they allow for a non-traditional remote location to be utilized that's convenient to the study participant. And then if we take this a step further, as we look at the bottom row, we see specific technologies that either have already been adopted or are being explored with the intention of making the participant experience even more flexible. So through technology, the objective is to keep participants fully connected and allow them to complete even more study activities remotely. So that being said, what I'd like to do then is just jump into how this has evolved over the last several years, and then as we jump to today. So from a historical perspective, decentralized clinical trials really started out as ad hoc, home health and phlebotomy, really more of a contingency plan and not proactively written into the protocol. And then industry started to take a more strategic and kind of slow look at how to move more procedures outside of the site than just phlebotomy. So things like actual IP administration. And to a risk-averse industry, it really made sense that these variances to the traditional model occur in a safer place. So phases 3 and 4, less complex protocols, and chronic ambulatory diseases, so not as complicated therapeutic areas. And then we began to see applications of technology to enable these procedures to be done outside of the site. So things like e-consent, remote data collection through smart devices. And then we have obviously experienced a catalyst like we've never experienced before, which is the COVID pandemic. And this is making this industry change much quicker than we are used to. And what was once a risk to the trial is now the exact risk mitigation strategy to ensure continuity of participant safety and data integrity. So what we're seeing, and why I'm mentioning this is, this is moving us to explore decentralized clinical trials outside of the safe zone. So your phases 3 and 4 and your chronic ambulatory diseases to basically any phase and any indication. And, this has been a very fast shift. And if this isn't enough, we're now, and I'm very, very encouraged by this, starting to see protocols being developed from the onset as flexible with virtual components really written in specifically and not as a contingency plan. So great progress overall. And so, Jimmy, you had mentioned this early on, but SCRS and VirTrial, we've always seen this as an opportunity for sites, and even more so now after the lessons learned during COVID. And I think what we've realized as a collaborative industry in the last 6 months, that the present and realistic model of DCTs is not siteless. It very much includes clinical research sites. And this hybrid model really keeps sites in the driver's seat and gives them the option to deliver care to their participants in a flexible location that works for both of them. And so the opportunity at hand for sites is to become educated with the tools they need to deliver this hybrid model. and maintain themselves, as a continued viable partner for sponsors and CROs. And so you'll see in some of the breakout ideas that I have is how can sites do that. Now, normally I would go into this presentation with several slides justifying the why for decentralized trials. Like our normal statistics that 70% of patients live more than 2 hours away from a site, the average, 30% dropout rate in a phase 3 trial, and how much that costs the industry. But everyone on this call I know is well aware of the why for decentralized trials. So I'll summarize it in the next slide quickly. But what I'd like to focus on with my remaining time are really the barriers to adoption so that we can carry the discussions forward to the breakout sessions. So overall benefits of virtual trials, I think I've got 5 outlined here, but number 1, more relevant data. It's being collected in more real time. Number 2, improved enrollment. So by relieving some of the burdens on patient travel and how many times they have to visit a clinic, we can improve enrollment. And then by expanding access, we also have improved population diversity. So this will lend nicely to next month's SCRS Now, Sites Now topic. 4, higher retention. And then 5, medical monitoring regardless of location. So obviously there's some great benefits, but if we can solve a lot of these by the promise of decentralized trials, I think we need to ask, why hasn't the industry moved faster in making this innovative study model a reality? And so that's where we'll move to barriers to adoption. So a statistic that I looked up specifically for this, this presentation is who has actually adopted DCTs. And I would open up, if anybody has something more contemporaneous than I'm about to say here, I would love to understand if this data is available. So the data is sparse as far as I've found, and I did find a 2018 VOCA Clinical Innovation and Technology Study. And again, that's 2018. Sorry, I moved too far. But it reported that 25% of sponsors and 14% of service providers had utilized virtual and telehealth technologies in their clinical trials. But these adoption numbers may be slightly inflated in that some respondents may be counting mobile health studies with eCOA/ePro or sensors in those studies when they weren't fully decentralized in moving visits from a clinic to a home. So as I mentioned, this is 2018. The picture is very, very different now. And I would love if anyone has, more up-to-date adoption metrics and is willing to share as part of today's call. So why haven't we adopted decentralized clinical trials? Well, there's very good reasons. Number 1, participant technology proficiency. So for example, can older populations comply with what's being asked of them from a technological perspective? That's just one example. 2, the lack of experience and actual proof points that decentralized trials actually deliver on the many promises. There's not a lot of, like I said, data from adoption to prove that we've increased retention and compliance and diversity. And then another big question that we get from the sponsor side is around site adoption. So will sites be willing to adopt these technologies and take part in the change? We know what happened during the days of EDC and how burdensome that was on the sites. And now we're actually, there, but this is bringing a new wave of technology. And encouragingly, SCRS has seen this, we've all been seeing this, but we've witnessed sites being very proactive and creative, taking steps to digitize their sites. But at the same time, it's really hard for them to make decisions on upfront investments as the industry and regulators are still figuring out what DCTs will look like. So traditionally, sites follow what sponsors dictate sites use. But another opportunity I believe the pandemic is bringing us is that there's a true desire for industry to listen to site feedback, carefully consider how any implementation of technology to reduce participant burden does not simultaneously increase site burden. And then finally, a huge component of the barriers to adoption is the lack of clear regulatory guidance and unanswered questions around regulatory acceptance of data generated by this study model. So also local country-like regulations have been unclear for global trials. So these are not insignificant barriers that we need to overcome. So quickly on moving to the next section, if regulatory guidances are so imperative to future DCT adoption, let's review some of the most recent guidances to dates and some not necessarily regulations, but some of the initiatives that the industry has collaborated on. So over the last few years, again, I'm sure everybody's well aware of these, a lot has been happening behind the scenes to create alignment on decentralized trials between industry and regulators. So the Clinical Trials Transformation Initiative, CITI, is a public-private partnership with the FDA, the EMA, the NIH, Duke University, and a number of industry stakeholders. And among other things, CITI provides guidance on DCTs, which will help direct implementation. And Trials at Home is an EU-funded project with wide industry participation. And the project is anticipated to run for 5 years, conduct a European pilot program in diabetes or dermatology, and will compare fully virtual, hybrid, and traditional models with an objective to provide much needed guidance and proof points. And with the onset of COVID, we've seen decentralized trials move from a novelty to a necessity really quickly. And the immediate impact is, sites cannot see participants, so they are missing protocol windows. Studies are at risk as safety and efficacy data are missing. And we lack training and tools to remotely monitor participants. So for example, even if a participant discontinues a study, they'll still need monitoring after withdrawal. And lastly, private research sites are experiencing a severely cash-strapped position. So in 2016, 66% of sites reported having less than 3 months of operating cash, and this is by a survey for SCRS. And this really has only been exacerbated by the pandemic disruption. So what regulators have acknowledged now is the need for participants and sites to complete visits remotely, for investigators to check in on participants in a meaningful and compliant way. And telemedicine is just one option for that. And not just telemedicine to facilitate the site to participant interaction, but also enable the site to capture data remotely. This can be done in a very similar manner that the site would do if the participant were in person, and by just moving that face-to-face interaction into a virtual environment. So additional recent guidance, we talked about CITI. We are all familiar with the FDA guidance on conduct of clinical trials during COVID. And most recently, the FDA actually finalized their guidance to industry for enhancing diversity of clinical trial populations. These are some specific excerpts from both of those recent FDA guidances. So again, on COVID-19, really enabling tools to be used to allow remote access to clinical research sites. But where I want to go next is looking forward. I really want to hone in on this idea of enhancing diversity in clinical trials, because what we see here is the FDA encouraging alternate clinical trial models to enhance diversity in clinical trials. And I truly believe that once we get beyond the pandemic, that our industries aim to increase enrollment of underrepresented populations in clinical trials so that we can really make sure people who are in clinical trials represent the populations most likely to use the product. I think this is going to be a very primary driver of the adoption of decentralized trials. And then the last point I want to touch on here, and this is purposely here as a thought-provoking question for the breakout sessions, but really, what is going to be allowed long-term after we emerge from our emergency state? So as we've discussed, regulators have temporarily reduced barriers during the pandemic to allow for simple tools to ensure continuity of participant safety and data integrity. but common tools allowed, and we get this question a lot. Again, I'm coming from a background of telemedicine, but Zoom and WebEx, can we continue to do that to allow sites to communicate with participants beyond this? And, you know, as we emerge from the pandemic, most of us expect that we'll find ourselves held accountable to the high level of standards relevant to clinical trials, including compliance requirements, full audit trail capabilities, interoperability with existing data capture systems. And so with this, I'd like to just stop here and take a break and thank you for allowing me the time to really just set the stage. You know, what are DCTs? We're very aware of that. Where have we been? Where are we now? And then truly focusing on the barriers. And this SCRS Sites Now initiative is the perfect platform for collaboration. These are some ideas that I came up with for breakout topics, but you have facilitators, and this can go quite anywhere as we break out into groups. But I tried to think about this from the key stakeholders, and this is not an exhaustive list, but first and foremost, what's the impact on sites? What are the implications to them? A key thing is PI oversight. How do we maintain PI oversight when we're moving patients outside of the clinic and using all these tools in home health? Also, big question is, what tech is study specific versus what should they have in-house? And I alluded to this during the presentation, but oftentimes by reducing the burden on the patient, that burden is then placed on the site. So how can we overcome that and make sure that the burden is reduced on both ends? And then obviously sponsors have a really hard job here. When COVID is done, what is going to stay? What goes back to traditional? And flexible protocol design, the urge is, well, let patients and sites decide where they do visits. That is not an easy thing to incorporate into a protocol. And then the service provider side, how do we work collaboratively amongst ourselves to address the number of disparate solutions that are available? We're still working in silos. We still have, you know, best in class service providers that we should have, but how can we move forward to integrate, make seamless end user platforms that make it a lot easier on our sponsors and CROs to adopt? So those are some ideas from me. And I will then stop and hand back over to either Jimmy or Sean. Who's up next?
I think we lost you, Amanda.
No, all you, Sean.
Okay. Well, everyone, thank you, Amanda. Great overview too. You know, when last year, one of the big topics coming from a number of angles, much like what Amanda shared here, was just informing people of what decentralized clinical trials means and what that could mean both as business opportunity or speed bump, you know, one more thing to learn. And when we left the Site Solutions Summit last year, our global impact partners came together and said, you know, here are some of the things we really feel like SCRS should approach. And one of those was training and information around DCT as a concept. And in that time frame, just in a year, obviously we've had an unprecedented pandemic, but for us, one of the key takeaways in that metric for our audience was how many sites were approached in 2019 to be involved in a virtual study of any type. And that answer was around 30%. This year, that has increased to 74%. So it's one of those things where I would say it's in terms of going back, I don't think it's going to go back, but I do think it'll evolve. And those are some of the things that we want to talk with you guys about in our breakouts. So we're going to break out into a couple of teams. You'll be joined by an SCRS staff person. They usually have the same background I have here today. And then we will, each of those groups will have a facilitator, and we'll just talk a little bit about some of these topics. But the main goal for our breakouts is really to understand what else does industry really need to know about decentralized clinical trials. Use some of Amanda's points to guide your conversation, or simply answer it that way. What does industry need to know still about decentralized clinical trials? And just to break the ice, since we're talking technology, we wanted to know and hear from each of you what your favorite app is right now. What app are you getting the most use out of, or is the most fun? And we'll hear from you guys in each of our breakouts with some of your answers. So looking forward to that. Thanks so much, Jimmy. We'll jump into our groups now.
Great, everybody. So we'll open the breakout rooms for about 50 minutes, and everyone will automatically get ported into their breakout room. They've been assigned randomly, but that'll happen in just a second here. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and open the rooms. They'll open for 50 minutes, 50 minutes, and there'll be a 2-minute countdown at the end of that 50 minutes where you will have that time to wrap up your conversation quickly, and then you will be forcefully jolted back here into the main session without your consent. So just be prepared for that. So I'm going to open the rooms now. I'm doing a little bit of last minute reshuffling here. There's been a couple people that seem to have dropped off, but no big deal. We'll get this going here and get things started. Thanks, everyone.
It sounds. I know we had I was on Maria Elena's team, and we had a great conversation. We got through 3 of Amanda's. Where is Amanda? There she is. Amanda, great points. They really did help kind of bring some things into focus. One thing I didn't get a chance to say, we were talking about briefly in our group about key opinion leaders and how to kind of involve site impact early. And it was interesting because, again, I'm just telling you that there's something to learn on each of these calls. Last month on the budgets and contracts, there was this moment where it's sort of like we were talking about budgets and contracts, and they said, at the onset of the work, there's an opportunity for all sides to be successful. I don't know, maybe that's where you start involving KOLs, but from the site side. But I think that there's a lot of ideas that we'll discuss. Well, guys, we're going to go around and we're just going to get a quick report from each of our teams. Well done, 42 of you hanging on strong here to this Sites Now. I know that, yes, some of you have said you'd cancel your whole afternoon to stay here on these calls. That's very sweet. Thank you. The question I have, and we'll start with Marcus, let's talk to your team a little bit. What were some of the key takeaways that your team shared? And guys, I'm not going to share my screen so we can all see each other talk, but I'll take notes. And like I had mentioned, after our, oh, you're trusting me to take notes. That's maybe not the best idea, but we'll get it. They'll be okay. They'll be okay. But we'll get you these notes in a quick follow-up here tomorrow or Thursday. Okay. So Marcus, tell us a little bit about what your team talked about and who were you working with?
I am going to pass it on to Dina. Dina was a wonderful facilitator, and it was just ongoing conversation on our team. I was looking back at the questions, and I think we did a remarkable job of hitting upon a lot of those points without going through them. Dina, any big takeaways? I have 2 pages of notes here, and I don't know if I can narrow it down.
I took some great notes, but I think one of the main themes that kept coming up, no matter what we were talking about or what aspect of decentralized clinical trials was choice, flexibility, options, and empowerment. And if sites and patients had these capabilities when we're offered decentralized hybrid models, I think it's a win-win. We got into a lot of details about a lot of different things, technology and what it looks like, how the models work, how one site, every site is different, and changing the boundaries and just all different aspects, regulatory, et cetera. But really that empowerment to choose your journey kept coming up, and I think that's a wonderful thing to put in our suitcase and our toolboxes as we move forward.
I'm curious.
I think we're also
and
excited about the future. Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I think we're also really excited about the future of decentralized trials and where this is going to take us afterwards. A large part of our discussion was around using technology for the better to make life easier. Our friend Kathy Vanderbilt from Oracle shared that. And for me, that was a big takeaway too, making sure that we're all on the same page, but also making sure that we're utilizing this and for the long term, not just for the pandemic reaction right now.
So Marcus and Dina, thank you. That was great. And I was curious for our sites on the line or anyone in any of the groups, if you're going through a trial right now and you're using you're going through a decentralized approach, do you have any anecdotal patient feedback? Has it, what are they saying? Tune in next time.
No, I'll chime in. The patients are telling us, at a site that they don't want to have to come in. So so the question is, can't they just get that blood work done locally and have the results sent to you? Can I give them the blood tubes? I've heard that. I've also heard, if I'm in the room and I'm not allowed to have any visitors, can I have somebody on the phone listening as we go over the consent process? So they do ask about it, and they do ask if there are means to accommodate their needs so that they don't have to come in here. So they are, from my perspective, they are asking.
Thank you. I go ahead, Jane.
I'm in a trial right now, and actually, it's an opportunity for me to think a lot about how it could be redesigned using some of these tools. And frankly, one of the biggest elements I'm thinking about daily is how do we enable data sharing back to the participants without breaking the blind? Because I'm in the vaccine trial, there are public health risks.
Well, certainly going into the compliance too. Marcus, I think you had a hand clap there, yeah? You agree?
Well, yeah, just also taking this, this year from the volunteer or patient side of this as well. I think there's a lot of aspects of DCT that are way more than just the virtual trial visit. If we were given the informed consent earlier and be able to read that ahead of time, that would have been, a thumbs up, just to take my time outside of the clinic and give them, to make it a safer place for them as well. I think there's going to be a lot more aspects of DCT than just the virtual trial aspect of it that we'll be taking further beyond the pandemic.
Patient experience for sure, no question about it. And something to consider for all the SCRSers on the line is, is that an opportunity for us to have that conversation, maybe even as soon as February or before, with some of our site members and their patients, and just maybe talking about those other ideas. I think they're useful too for stakeholders. We talked about stakeholders and getting them involved with how things kind of trickle down to the site. Of course, easier said than done, but sometimes it's the business incentive side of it, and what it means if you were to treat the patient with an experience that keeps them engaged and coming back. I mean, sometimes I hadn't even thought about the having someone listen in for consent or to consent, because that's big though. I mean, I can say that we're kind of going through that in our family. So just with how that's approached, and I feel like there are a lot of applications. You're 100% right, Marcus. That'll come out of this. These few months that we've been in and have ahead of us.
I have a question.
Anything else that your team? Yeah.
Yeah. In what form would be best for that listening in? Just listening on like a voice, or also a video interaction? In that process, that's sort of tied to the consenting process.
I think they would take anything. I think they would take anything we were offering, so we have patient who's in the room, we have, we can have them on a three-way call. We can also have iPads where they can zoom in and listen to the conversation. People are making an important decision about their health, and they want someone else to be there with them. And also, if you've ever been consented before, there's a lot of information to process. And if you're thinking, I have whatever disease and they're trying to do whatever to me, and I'm missing half your information. On a good day, most people miss, 30% or 40% of what other people say anyway. It's always good to have that backup. So.
Right. So the patient has to see the information, I guess, in their own time as well, right? Some of it ahead of time, right?
Yeah.
Get access to that. Yeah.
Transparency in the process. Geez, awesome topics. Thank you. Thank you, guys. Well, Maria Elena, since you had the mic, I'll ask, what were some of you, we kind of covered PI oversight, when COVID is completed, what goes back or doesn't, and then just site implications. What did you have? What did you highlight from our conversation today?
I think the biggest takeaway was, early and frequent communication, not only with the teams, but also with the other stakeholders that may be peripherally affected by research. So I come from a site network, so a hospital site network, so I have other departments that I have to answer to. And so they're not as well aware of the speed that all these changes are going on around us. And so we have to try and catch them up. So to get that that communication and transparency up to wherever it needs to go. So that was a big one. And all the stakeholders working together. I didn't take any notes because I was kind of in the conversation, Sean. So if you got the notes.
No, you're right. One of we keep coming up to and for our workforce friends on the call, like staff model, the impact of adaptation, what that means for the site staff model. That came up towards the end again. And that's come up on almost every call, is the impact of everything we're doing, our teams are doing, our members are doing, and moving beyond. But what's that mean for their teams? Are their teams built differently for what we do, for what SCRS does as a member organization? I just happened to be looking at a industry website, and think of like what we've had to transition. We're not able to see you all. We're meeting here. There are new roles being created at associations everywhere that are that's just the associations that are involving digital meeting managers and digital experience teams. These types of new roles that didn't even exist. They were sort of, we've qualified. We've gone beyond qualifying the idea that there can be success with decentralized study or hybrid trials. And now I think that what's that going to mean for our workforce? That was a topic of interest. We also talked a little bit about the key opinion leaders, and we had a moment where we were talking about how do we help sponsors and CROs help their sponsors share how important it is for site feedback at the onset of the study. I think Maria Elena, being our lone site representative in our group, you sort of said, hey, the earlier the better, right? And yeah. I shared the story of the contracts just a minute ago, how there's an opportunity even when you're getting started with the working relationship to have those. Hey, here's some things we've learned. I think it's important for you all to know it. But it came down to time being a factor, and talking about how we can help those project teams understand that it's actually an investment in moving faster, which is hard. It's hard whenever you have to add more. It's almost like you're adding a level of bureaucracy when you ask for feedback, but the reality is that it helps inform some of those decisions. And we just came up with a couple of ideas around privacy, GDPR, how all the virtual technology is actually creating situations where you're going to have to rethink about the way we handle privacy. as patients. And I think, Jane, to your point, is there's a study at stake, or there's a national health at stake here. So you're looking at what does that mean for everyone involved, and then maybe the people, you specifically as a patient participant. We talked a lot about industry focusing on training to help with oversight and standardization, and identifying best practices in telemedicine to point to. And I know every group has some awesome studies. And by the way, awesome, thank you everyone if you are following the track or the chat, there is wonderful links to a couple of other organizations' studies. We also have some information in the site landscape, but there's an opportunity here to talk about it at the site partnership level too. I think that was the overwhelming feedback from some of the conversations. Did I miss anything, Maria Elena, or team?
No, you actually got it all, and I missed all of that because I was, you summarized it very nicely.
Well, my SCRS professors will be proud because I'm not known for the best notes. But the go ahead.
I was just taking in the chat of the conversation of everybody, and as trying to write down a couple of things, but you definitely got it all. Thank you.
Well, and I think Casey added just one, and that was the protocol is written in such a way that allows a virtual or in-person visit. So some flexibility there, for sure, for the patients to have some choice. And we're seeing how powerful that is in all areas of tech. I mean, we were talking. We had some fun with some of the apps we all chose. No one mentioned any of the food delivery apps, but I will tell you that the moment they stopped saying that you could delivery, you didn't have to wipe down all the delivery, any food delivery. Those apps made it unbelievably easy and flexible to choose, and that application is just about consumer choice. And I think that's an interesting lesson, perhaps, as we go. Awesome. Hey, how is Team Allison doing? What did you guys talk about?
Hi.
And who are you? You were working with Todd, I believe.
Yes, we were working with Todd. We had a great conversation. We learned a lot about different apps. So we're all excited that we have new apps to play with in our downtime. But I'm going to turn it over. I'm going to let Todd have the floor and talk a little bit about what the conversation was during our breakout session.
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Allison. Yeah, I think, we had a pretty good discussion, really on that investigator oversight issue, and particularly in dealing with third-party vendors to help manage, home visits. A lot of anxiety on the site side in terms of PI oversight, training, and liability. And, and speaking to some of the industry providers that were on our session, and also some of the sponsor representatives, I think, what landed on, seems to provide the most comfort across the board is that, if the sponsor can select the vendor, but really it should be the site to be the one to contract with the vendor, to be responsible for vetting the training of the actual personnel, to make sure all that stuff's in place. But at the end of the day, the sponsor then needs to pay for it all. And then you need to make sure that the liability and indemnifications are covered, so that the site isn't exposed if this vendor, does something that goes outside of your regular indemnification with the sponsor as well. And I think, that model, I think, would provide more comfort than the site being completely hands off, and then the sponsor just, contracting a vendor and sending somebody to a patient's home while it's still under the PI's responsibility. So that was, a piece we covered really well. I think in terms of, speaking to the sponsors and in dealing with the new line item expenses that are landing on study budgets, there certainly seems to be some sponsor feedback that, they're anticipating this, they're putting messaging out to their their staff members, what to expect and how to respond to it. So hopefully there shouldn't be, surprises, when sites are asking for these things, and they'll become, more standard in study budgets over time. And I thought that was, pretty encouraging as well, for the sites to be able to manage those additional costs with it. And then overall, we really, we talked about, where is this going? The idea that we want to move forward, we don't want to move back, and the idea that these technologies will help not only in the existing situation, but I think it'll help it'll help sites and sponsors to be more patient-centric going forward. And I brought up examples of, oftentimes in your screening patients, you get to the consent process and you find out they're going to have a long vacation or they're snowbirds, and for these reasons you have to exclude certain patients over time from being in longer-term studies. And adapting these more flexible study models will allow inclusion of more patients into studies and help. And then overall, the idea that this pandemic could happen again, it's very likely it could happen again, and we'll be more prepared for it, and it won't be as disruptive when it does, because if protocols are designed and in a way that to allow for this flexibility, and the technology continues to improve to support them better. Let me know if I missed anything key.
Great. I think, Amanda, anything else to add to that? I think Todd and
I think Todd did a great job.
Yeah.
So thank you, Todd. And I'll just say I did actually say Instacart was my favorite app. Sean. So great job. It was a really, really good session. Thanks, everybody.
Oh, that's great. Thanks, Todd. Thanks, Amanda. I mean, I think one thing that happened last year when we were all able to meet in person, we were invited to participate once in a sponsor site manager forum where they had sort of all their sites together, and they invited us to come talk, and we had a lot of fun. Casey and Marcus and I went with some colleagues, and it was one thing that I had never really given a ton of thought about. It was the way that we like to call them solution providers or business partners, right? So how those relationships were managed, how they were, and when were some of those decisions made, and was there room for better performing or improved performance, or hey, it's time to move on. Those were all interesting pieces of feedback that the site teams had an enormous amount of insight and feedback on, and it kind of goes back to Jane from our team she had a lot of great points around working with those key opinion leaders. And I think there's something to be said about how we're managing our business or solution provider partnerships within the study. Same thing. And we're all going to learn a few lessons, I think, here along the way. I will share that the folks that are involved from a business partner or solution provider standpoint with SCRS have always done a tremendous job of understanding that, actually, and understanding the dialogue that goes top to bottom, bottom up, depends on where you fit in the clinical enterprise. But I think that there's a lot of opportunity there. I think that's one quick thing is, yes, I see a couple of quick notes in our chat. If there's anything you want to chat to the group, we have a handful of moments left to share that. But I will say that you can also download the chat. I don't know if you guys do that, but you could download the chat, and if you're so inclined, you just simply save chat, and it'll ask you how you want to save it. But we will go ahead and I don't think we've been doing that, and maybe we can do that for our follow-up. So I'll ask my team if you wouldn't mind saving that chat, and we'll go ahead and reference it in the follow-up, everyone. Awesome conversation today. We have a couple of ideas on not only topics and work streams, but really, where do we take this conversation next? And what would be the most valuable piece of content to push out to our audiences. So I'm curious, and Amanda, we're probably going to start with you, but I think what we would like to do is a quick interview with some of you on the call today, and maybe we'll start with some of the chats and some of our team leaders just on what industry needs to be understanding about this evolution of decentralized clinical trials, hybrid approach, and considerations as a starting point for where we can go with it. Every time we do this, we try to mention all of our sponsors and supporters. I'll just remind everyone, if there's someone new you met today, if there's a way that you can help them with something, or even just to reach out to throw them a hi sign, please do that. That's what the SCRS community was all about. And today I always try to wear it's on this side in the video. I always try to wear my Christine glasses to remind us of where we got started. And I think she would be really proud of the work that everyone's contributed here today. So thank you so much, guys, for your time. And we look forward to seeing you in a couple ways. Next week, we got the forum. Okay, that's going to be on Turkey Tuesday, we're calling it. We're having some fun with it. We hope you could tune in. It is for everyone. Anyone on your team want to join, you can invite them. Jimmy will include the link in our follow-up to all of you from this call. We'll include the link to register. It's just a Zoom meetup, and we're gonna treat it like that. We expect a pretty big audience, so please tune in. It'll be shorter. It'll be small, shorter time frame. And then we've got beyond that, next month we're talking diversity, and then we've got our 2021 kicks off with the Virtual Oncology Summit. If you'd like to learn more about our 2021 programs, please make sure you reach out to Marcus or myself. I can't believe how many folks have reached out about it already, and we're appreciative of that. So thanks for your support here today. Have an awesome rest of your week. And if we don't see you, have a great holiday next week, okay? Thanks, everyone.
Bye, everybody.
Bye, everyone.
Bye, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Good to see everyone. Bye.
Bye.